All right, it is 6 p.m. and I will call this meeting of the Lunenburg Town Council to order. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I'd also like to note that we have regrets from Councillor Ernst, and Councillor Halverson is joining us virtually. And as well, I'm sure everyone is as pleased as I am that it is the first council meeting for our new permanent CAO, Jamie Doyle, which is very pleasing. And with that, I will look for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Bertels. Any additions or deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. It takes us on to the meeting minutes, June 28th. If I can get a motion to approve those as circulated, moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any errors or omissions to note? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, we have one public hearing, presentation tonight regarding a public transit feasibility study. We are joined by Greg Kerwin and Gary Ramey. You guys can come up to the mic. There's a timer here. You'll have 10 minutes to give your presentation, and then we will allow for 5 minutes of council questions. Sorry, Gary, if you can just use your mic.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship and councillors, and congratulations, Mr. Doyle, on your new position. Reason we're here, obviously, talk about public transit. It's been an issue that's been discussed for a long time in Lunenburg County by many different people, particularly a group of people called Citizens for Public Transit, of which I'm not a member, but that's the group I think that was driving the bus, if you'll pardon that bad pun, for a long, long time. And there have been 3 studies so far that I'm aware of anyway, about public transit, one in 2009, one in 2014, one in 2017. And the 2017 one was published in 2019. And it's a really very comprehensive one. It was done by CBCL, a consulting company, and they did a great job. And all the studies indicated that Lunenburg County could really benefit from public transit. Of course, the question then becomes, is public transit affordable in Lunenburg County? It's carried on in other parts of our province and other parts of our of the Atlantic region. I guess most notably, most people would be aware of the King's transit system, I think. And that was a really ambitious one, and it covers an awful lot of territory. It originally ran from West Kings or West Hants, which is basically Windsor, the whole way to Digby, 165 kilometers, long ways. And as a matter of fact, I do think they lopped off the West Hants piece, but they still run Wolfville, Kentville to Digby through the floor of the valley. So it's, pretty much a straight line. What we were thinking of is a transit system that would hook Lunenburg, Mahone Bay, and Bridgewater together, a triangulation, at least for a modest start. And if it were to happen, we would be most interested in using electric buses, not diesel or gas, given a whole bunch of reasons, which most of you are aware of, cost of fuel, but also what everybody's talking about, which is reducing carbon emissions. So we're not here to talk about whether or not it's something that looks like it would be very important for the citizenry of the county, because that's already been indicated on 3 different studies, most notably this last one. What we're interested in doing is funding ourselves, Mr. Kerwin and myself, Greg and I, paying for a feasibility study to see if we could come up with a business plan that would make it affordable for Lunenburg County to have such a system. And we know if the money's not there, that's not sustainable. Obviously, it would start up and fail, or wouldn't start up at all. So what we've done recently is we contacted Modal, Municipality District Lunenburg, and they had us in on June the 8th. And they passed a motion. Did you get a little bit of a package with just this one pager and the motion? They passed a motion just saying that they agreed that we could spend our own money to do the feasibility study. And last night we met with the Bridgewater Town Council, and they were also in favor of us moving ahead. And they passed a motion. I don't have it yet because it has to be come out in the minutes and be approved, but I will have that forthcoming. And we're meeting with Mahone Bay on the 28th, and it was very kind of you folks to see us tonight. So we're not asking for money. We're at basically what we're asking for is for support, at least verbal support, for us to go ahead and do a very comprehensive, well thought out feasibility study on whether or not we can come up with a sustainable model. And then what we'd like to do, once we've accomplished that, we want to present it in a much more, it would be a substantially more formal presentation than what we're doing tonight, obviously. And then we would target that for some time in the fall, because we're going to work on it all summer. And then if that were to fly, then we would want to look at maybe trying a pilot study in the spring of next year. And, you know, I don't even know if those timelines are particularly realistic. And we know that there's an awful lot of work that we have to do and a fair amount of money that we're going to have to spend to research this. Some of you may be aware that in PEI, they now have a transit system throughout the entire rural area of the entire province. And I haven't looked at it. I'm going to. The same way when we go to Kings, I mean, I want to ride the bus system and I want to talk to the passengers. I just don't want somebody to tell me this is what we do. Here's our spreadsheet on the money it takes to do it and all that. That's very important and critically important, but we want to know really what mistakes they made, whether or not it's working like they thought it would, whether or not they're going to be able to sustain it and all the rest of it. So that's kind of why we're here tonight. Now, I've probably used up almost my 5 minutes, or getting close. I want Greg to be able to say a few things too, just very quickly, so you know who we are. Most of my, well, I have a connection to this town because my great, that's 4, right? Grandfather's buried under that church over there. His name was Jean-Baptiste Moreau, and he was the first missionary here. And I believe he's buried under the church over there. So I have, you know, very fond and lasting fond memories of this town, and of course it's beautiful architecture and all the rest of it. But I have a great fondness for the whole county. So grew up here, BA, BEd, MA, PhD, sort of in various universities, taught at U of A, taught in the community college system, administrator in the community college system, taught in the high school system, formed a company with 2 of my colleagues called Mediation Arbitration Group, Inc. So I'm a mediator arbitrator, and been in business most of my life as well. Own properties both in the county and in the town of Bridgewater. And so that's my background. Now, Greg will say a little bit about his when he comes up here to speak. But so basically what we're hoping for, just when I sum up here and go sit down for a while, is maybe if you saw fit to do it, a motion of support similar to what Modal has done. And even if you wanted to hold off on that until you see what Bridgewater has done, and we're going to be asking Mahone Bay as well. And that's and it's entirely, of course, up to folks whether or not you'd be interested in doing that or not. But I'll turn it over now to my colleague Greg and say a few words. Greg.
Good evening. Thank you very much for tonight and allowing us to come here today to present this. My name is Greg. I have been a business person in Halifax for over 30 years. I've worked in the, I've had numerous businesses in the medical world. That was for 20 years, multiple businesses. If you needed any of our products and services, that's probably not a good thing because they're around treatments. I created Canada's largest vertical farm company and sold most of it to McCain Foods about 3 years ago, called True Leaf Indoor Farming, and then retired for about 8 weeks and then started a new company of medical nutrition, of which we have a new beverage that's sold coast to coast. I met Gary 3 years ago. Gary and I are friends. We've talked about this concept for quite a bit, and I think the time is perfect. When I look at it from a business perspective, it has to be sustainable. The key is the financial model, in my opinion, to show that it's sustainable. We're not naive on the annual operating cost to this model. From an execution point of view, that doesn't worry me as much. I think if you look at what's the benefit to Lunenburg or the region as an aggregate, one point that I think is really worth noting is if you had a multi-community service that focused on sustainability and disability, tourism, I think would be a big piece to it. I think for me particular, it's about seniors. They were an isolated group in rural Nova Scotia before COVID. With COVID, I think it's even more acute. So there's lots of boxes checked on why this makes sense. Economically, socioeconomically, tourism, people with disabilities. The folks that I've kind of run this by seem to feel it's a really good idea. So I think what we're looking for tonight is to get your interest and buy-in. As I said, my interest is helping fund something socially that makes sense, that's impactful. I do think this model, if it's done right, not just in Lunenburg, but in Bridgewater and Mahone Bay and hopefully Petite. My wife and I are living in Petite the last couple of years. It's kind of home now, which is it's a lot quieter than Halifax, trust me. Anyway, I see the time is done. Thank you very much, and we're excited for your feedback.
Thank you. Are there any questions of council at this stage? Councillor Sanford.
If you could just help me understand, Mr. Rainey, when you were speaking, you were talking about a pilot study perhaps in spring of 2023. How would you see that funded?
Well, that's where the rubber starts to hit the road. But we, both Greg and I are reasonably well connected with all levels of government. We would be asking for provincial funding and perhaps some federal funding to get that pilot study underway. And I might just add very quickly, part of the reason this is stuck in my craw for so long is I was the MLA for Lunenburg West from 2009 to 2013. And my colleague in this area for Lunenburg was Pam Birdsall. And we knew that at that time, people were coming to us and saying, can you get some money for us for a pilot? You know, we'd really like to run a pilot and see if the public transit would work here. So Pam and I working together got $125,000 from the provincial government to put toward a pilot. And at that time, we had asked the 4 municipal districts, and we were trying to get them to talk about their population sizes in relation to this, but we wanted them to come up with a chunk of the money as well between the 4 of them, not any one group putting in a giant amount, but trying to get the other part, funded by the 4 municipal units. And it's my understanding, and I might have this wrong, and I stand corrected if I don't, because the same players aren't around anymore that were there at the time. The mayors are different, the councillors are different, but it seems to me that Lunenburg, Mahone Bay, and Bridgewater said, yeah, okay, let's find a way to do it. And Modal said, no, we don't want to do that right now. And the funding got lost. So we have a precedent to the fact that money was up there one time a number of years ago, and we would be vigorously going after that money to make this work again. And we would be presenting the funding formula that we come up with to the various municipal units. And of course, they would be able to look at it and go, well, if you're getting this much from there and this much from there, maybe we can participate a bit. Or they may say, again, we're not particularly interested in doing that right now. And then we still wouldn't be moving forward. Do you want to add anything to that, Greg?
Well, I think, Susan, that's a good question. I think it's, to me, there's 2 pieces of funding. There's the upfront capital, which I don't think would be too cumbersome. It's the key thing to focus on is the annual operating cost. And you would have to think of a 5-year term. Not that we would say that at the end of 5 years it's done, but you have to plan for worst case scenario. And if worst case scenario, we organize the capital and the funding both upfront and annual, and worst case scenario, if after the end of the 5 years that it's just not working, then, obviously it's brought down and the buses are sold or whatever. But I think there's a federal position here, and I have lots of experience working federally. There's a provincial proposition. I do believe there has to be a municipal piece to this. There's definitely going to be a private piece to this, and I think that's the key. And obviously, I think there'd be no problem if it's marketed right, but there'd be a community piece as well. So, for me, from my vantage point, I've raised over $100 million in my career with my businesses. So I do feel at this point it's definitely viable, but the key to focus on when we come back, if we're privileged enough to come back to present to you folks in September, say, is to focus on how the annual operating costs are funded.
I'll just see if Councillor Sanford's finished.
Just thank you for that clarification. I'm just, as we're planning and going forward, we have to operate under our budgets and our guidelines. So if there's something that we need to be considering as we go forward, when we're planning our next budget, it would be good to know that in advance. My other comment, and then I'll turn this to Ed, is that not all towns are funded equally. So I'm hoping that perhaps in your model, when you create whatever that model is, that you can look how towns can contribute within their capacity. So that would just be a suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford.
if
I just want to get Councillor Halverson and
Sure.
Gary, and we're against the clock. So Councillor Halverson.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate the presentation. This is something that I think we're all aware has been batted around for a long time. As you mentioned here, there's been studies forever. I'm really keen to see, the one thing we've never actually had is hard numbers. So I'm really keen to see your study and see how feasible it actually is. I mean, I'm a little concerned when I look at your presentation and you say you're under no delusion that it's going to be profitable, which leads me to wonder, where that money is going to come from eventually, whether you're looking for provincial or federal money to keep that afloat, what investment, to Susan's, Councillor Sanford's point, we are going to be involved or on the hook for that. But yeah, transportation is key. So, I mean, for me at this point I'm looking forward to seeing your feasibility study so we can actually have some more concrete numbers to make more decisions, better informed decisions going ahead. So thank you again.
Yeah, well, thank you. And obviously the numbers are going to be totally important. And your comment about the way towns are funded, I mean, this is all of the things we have to look at very closely as we're moving forward. One of the things we'd like to do is if it's set up as a nonprofit, then people could contribute. You can donate to the hospital, you get a tax receipt. If you really believe in public transit and you want to donate to public transit, the Lunenburg County or United Communities public transit system, you can donate to that and get a tax receipt. So there's different ways we're going to be looking at trying to make the numbers work. But obviously, nobody can make any kind of a decision, even on a pilot, until they see the hard numbers. And this is the hard work we have to do. And we said the other night, we were aiming for September, and the mayor of Bridgewater said, well, that's great. And but don't rush it. If it's going to take you till October or November or even December to really get it nailed down. So when you come, you've really got it pretty much sorted out and there aren't very many holes in there that can be picked apart, we'd be willing to wait the extra time just to make sure that you've got it done in a very comprehensive way. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. This is on our agenda later in the evening, so we will let you know what happens when we discuss it then.
Thank you. Could we make one more comment just before we go?
Quickly.
Well, I just quickly want to add to the comment. I was involved in the early days of trying to get the Halifax Hospice off the ground. And so I have quite a bit of experience understanding it, very, very similar formats here. The hospice isn't a profit generator, socially duly much needed. And so I think the magic is a formula where the provincial government has a role to play. And I think the economics and the socioeconomic benefit would be self-explanatory. I think your comment's very good about a percentage of what's on the hook for each individual municipality. But I think the annual operating contribution, particularly provincially, federally is nice. It's a nice to have, but we can't plan for a must to have.
Thank you. Greg, if you can just shut the microphone off there before you leave. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
So that takes us on to correspondence, petitions and proclamations consideration. There are 2 pieces of correspondence there for council's information, but nothing else. That takes us on to committee meeting recommendations, reports, notices of motion. There are 2 pieces, 1 piece for information from the Project Lunenburg steering team, and there is a recommendation coming out of the Protective Services meeting. The deputy mayor is noted next to that as the chair, so I will turn the floor over to him.
Thank you, Worship. Well, this recommendation from the Protective Services Committee came forward when it was brought to our attention that the exhaust extraction system that we had budgeted, it was coming in at double the cost of what we were estimating. So it was the committee's feeling, along with the district, that this is too big a burden to bear or to come back and ask our prospective councils to bear in 1 year. So the motion is to give us a couple of options. One, whether we install it now and the vendor would give us 2 fiscal periods to pay for it, or they would hold the price until next year, that we could at least have something that was solid to budget on. So the motion's there presented. I will read it out to you, and I'll leave it out for discussion.
Okay, would you be so kind as to move?
I would move that motion. Yes, thank you, Worship.
Seconded by Councillor Sanford. Is there any discussion, debate, or questions? Oh, you're going to declare conflict. Councillor Bertels is declaring conflict. We will note that for the minutes. You're still quorum. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Bertels can now resume in the shortest conflict of interest declaration ever. We are on to new business. There is a capital project status update and a staff report. I will turn it over to the relevant staff to present that update.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our first capital status update for fiscal 22-23 was given at the June 14 meeting. Based on council inquiries, staff provide further update to potential projects and projects at risk for the 22-23 fiscal year. So starting with the Green Street sidewalk renewal, this is currently in its design phase. The design is expected to be completed in early September. The staff have identified both budget and timeline risk, and this may require further deferral till fiscal 23-24. We'll be able to provide a further update in early September when the design and cost estimate are received. The Duke Street and Prince Street reconstructions. This is also currently in the preliminary design phase. Design is expected to be completed later this month in July, and then the tendering process will commence. And the construction work would be expected to commence in September this year. There's the potential of a budget risk based on the current market conditions and the time of year we're coming into. A further staff report will be compiled once the tender period is complete, which is anticipated to be during August. Tannery Road water main replacement. So some revisions were needed to the existing design to incorporate temporary water, and also part of the storm separation scope that was defined by CSK 05 that was in the same area of Tannery. Staff have determined it's necessary to tender this work based on the complexity of the scope and the expected duration of the work. The advantage of moving to contracted resources is that it frees up public works staff to have the maximum opportunity to complete operating maintenance on roads, sidewalks, and other infrastructure around the town during the summer period. The change to the contracted services will impact the timelines, but we still anticipate this work being completed in the 2022 construction season. But again, the current market conditions may impact the expected budget. So it's our expectation that the water main replacement storm separation work would proceed sometime in September after the tendering process and have a duration of 6 to 8 weeks based on the scope. The Tannery Road sidewalk construction is currently in the preliminary design phase. The design is expected to be completed in mid to late July. So with the Tannery Road sidewalk job being so close to the Tannery Road water main and storm separation, there's definitely potential that the water main replacement will impact the sidewalk construction, just where the two work zones overlap. And it doesn't seem likely that the sidewalk work will be able to complete it in fiscal 22-23 based on this. The expectation still would be that the design work is completed, and that would allow us to proceed with the actual construction work early in fiscal 23-24 to take advantage of potentially better market conditions at that time. The repair to the spillway at Dares Lake. So staff recommend that this project be put on hold until the water withdrawal approval renewal is completed. This will give staff the exact requirements of the ecological maintenance flow that's required. And it's also anticipated that a watercourse alteration permit will be necessary for that work. Our consultant has confirmed that delaying the construction work into 2023 poses low risk to key components of the town's water system. And finally, the new roof at the Armories building. Since winter, staff have had an opportunity to determine the condition of this existing roof at the Armories is in fine condition. The small leak that was evident has been patched, and staff recommends that this project be cancelled for fiscal 22-23. We have a summary table of the capital projects attached, and there is a draft motion for your consideration.
Thank you, Tyson. Are there any questions at this stage? Councillor Halverson.
Thanks. Thanks for the update, Tyson. Appreciate it. I will say I'm disappointed that we're not going to see that Tannery Road sidewalk this year. That's been a long time coming, and I think a lot of people have been looking forward to it. I mean, I understand obviously you're going to be digging up underneath or on the other side of the road wherever the water line is, and we can't, it's narrow enough as it is. But yeah, again, it's just disappointing to have to put that off again now another year. I guess my question is, how did we miss that? You say that should have been addressed and it should have been mentioned as a problem or a potential issue when the water work was assigned. How did we miss that? And are there measures in place to make sure, we're not going to miss something like this again in the future?
Through the chair, I think a big aspect that impacts, like we have the excavation in the roadway that affects Tannery Road, but we also have the fact that in our water system, Tannery Road is a dead end. So in order for the temporary water, we're servicing the existing residents in the work zone in that Green Street Tannery transition, Blue Nose Academy, but then The temporary water also has to tie into the first hydrant up on Tannery Road, which is opposite, well, I think it's in front of Civic 56. So it's quite a ways up, and it's a 3-inch line that I anticipate will be running over the surface, except for driveway crossings, sidewalk crossings, that kind of thing. As we all recognize, Tannery Road is a very tight place. So to have a 3-inch water line that's critical to everyone that's on Tannery Road on one side, a trench in the center of the road, and then sidewalk construction going in that same vicinity, I think is asking a lot, especially potentially having 2 different contractors working in the same zone, trying to share such a tight area. I don't really see it as feasible.
Well, if maybe I should clarify my question. That really wasn't what I was asking. We all understand that I understand the challenges. We get that. My question was more, in your report, you mentioned that this is something that should have been brought forward as a potential issue when the waterwork was proposed, that it could potentially delay the sidewalk. It wasn't. And I'm just wondering how we can avoid missing something like that again. Are there some measures in place? Something that the ways of, when these projects are designed or assigned a priority to make sure that, there's consideration for, how one project may impact another, and getting that information out in a timely fashion.
Through the chair, I would say the necessity of the temporary water either was miscommunicated or it wasn't identified until more recently, and that's one of the major issues that contributes to the tightness of Tannery Road.
That answer, are you finished, Councillor Halverson?
It's still me got the question. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Obviously, we need to provide water for people who live along there. I live along there. I know I need water. But the point is the fact that there was a temporary line needed and that was missed, and no one thought to include that or thought about it during this process until very late in the game, is an issue. I mean, we should be better prepared for these kind of eventualities. And again, I understand too, you're also, a couple months into your position. So this is something that I would anticipate probably predated you. I just want to make sure, and again, I'm not holding people's feet to the fire here, but I just want to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So we're not, we're not stuck in this situation again where we have a project that has a lot of people been looking forward to, and then we have to delay it again because of some unforeseen eventuality. I'd like to make sure that we have, all of our bases covered, and we have a better picture of what our projects and the scope of our projects is going to look like, and the impacts it may have on other projects.
I think I've got the finance director looking at.
And maybe just to further what the town engineer has said, and to Councillor Halverson's point, as noted, Tyson has only been with the town for a short period of time, and we've already had lots of conversations about better capital planning and how to sort of more holistically look at these projects. So I guess to your point is that we've already discussed it. Like when we identified this as an issue, it was like that just reinforces yet again the importance of those things. And it really is unfortunate in these particular projects, but it's top of mind for all of us as we're working towards our capital budget for the next year.
Thank you. And I think I should mention that I think Councillor Halverson is expressing what I think is a bit of general frustration on council's part. And we recognize that we're having horses in midstream here, but by next year, we'd like to stop hearing next year. I have Councillor Duggan and then the Deputy Mayor.
I answered my own question, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks. I have the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that this capital status update is welcome to see for me being on council for a long time. This is the first time I've seen a report like this, and it keeps us up to date and abreast of where you're at. And it's much nicer to know that in 1st of July than it is in the end of December, which is kind of like in the past was when we would find out our projects were way behind and most of the time not even going to get done. The only thing I question here, and it's sort of like along that, it's not even a question, it's just sort of an observation. And it's, I think alongside, as Councillor Halverson was saying, like when I look at your time frame here, and it says like we identify a project, we budget it, we design it, we tender it, and then we commence work all in 1 year. And some of these projects are fairly significant. So that seems to be a big nut to turn in a fiscal period lots of times. And it does set us up for failure. But when I look at this, and to your point of the sidewalk being, tendered for next year, is there an advantage tendering now for next year's projects as opposed to, now for this year's projects? So in your experience, is there an advantage there for us to be ahead of the curve a little bit that way?
Through the chair, I agree with, I think what you're getting at there, Councillor or Deputy Mayor, that in my experience, the best time to tender work is when it's competitive and contractors are hungry, which is earlier in the year to start work. When everyone is busy and resources are tight and you've got commitments that you need to get completed, then I think that's potentially when it's less competitive and the town would feel the effects of that. So I think our best chance of getting in competition with the contractors and tenders is early in the next year.
Thank you. And I think like in defense of the sidewalk, I mean, there's no bigger flag flyer than that for me, but I know what with the water main, the issues that came up around that in some of our meetings with our past, with Kevin as our temporary CAO. I mean, providing water for a major business there and putting the sidewalk in first, which comes first? Well, it's pretty obvious that the water issue would be resolved before the sidewalk. So it's unfortunate, but by the sounds of things, we'll have a sidewalk in the spring.
Any further questions? I just have one, and I'm wondering what is the relative game plan with staff? I mean, we're getting behind what our expectations were for this year. So we're going to be looking next year to catch up on that work. Is that then going to displace other amounts of work into future years? Or are you looking to catch up in a way that, we're planning ahead so that we can, we'll have a lot of work next year and maybe the year after, but are you looking to maintain those levels or are we going to be dealing with more deferrals?
Our plan is to get ahead with the preparation work and the design work to allow us to execute the same amount of work as we forecast. So this year it seems like we're a bit behind, and this status update kind of reflects that. Unfortunately, none of us want it to be that way, but we're trying to be realistic. But better planning, allowing us to be prepared in order to take advantage of the better market conditions, I think will hold the town in the best position.
Yeah, so just to clarify, like you're looking to make up the project, make up the time on the back end of, say, the 5-year period with the same amount of projects that we would have done year over year. It's not as if things are getting deferred further. I see the assistant engineer would like to weigh in.
Yeah, I was just going to add that when we discuss, future capital budgets, we see the need for the major projects to have first a design year and then a construction year. So these projects that maybe the construction is getting deferred to next year, well, at that time we'll be in design for the design year for future projects that would be constructed the following year. So we recognize that when we are sort of moving forward with our capital budgeting.
All right, thank you. That's very encouraging. And thank you to staff for giving that report. There is a draft motion provided. for a staff request. Is Councillor Sanford, pleasure to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Water utility, purchase of your replacement chlorinator. There is a staff report.
Thank you, Your Worship. The processes for the water treatment plant require 4 V10K chlorine gas feeders be available at all times to operate. 2 are used in the pre-chlorination phase and 2 are used for the secondary chlorination of the distribution water leaving the plant. Staff require a 22-23 capital budget increase approval to proceed with the purchase of the chlorine gas feeder. This gas feeder would be able to be substituted in for any of the other existing feeders in the process in the case of breakdown or maintenance. There was provision for the new chlorine gas feeder in the 22-23 water utility capital budget in the amount of $9,500, including the net HST. A quote was recently obtained from the supplier for the chlorine gas feeder. The current price is $11,800, including the contingency and the net HST. With this particular piece of equipment, there is one sole supplier for the chlorine gas feeder that's compatible with the infrastructure at the water treatment plant. Staff recommends that the amount of the 22-23 capital budget be increased by $2,300 to allow the purchase of the chlorine gas feeder. The water utilities depreciation funds are available to cover this additional cost. There is a motion drafted for your consideration.
Thank you, Tyson. Is it anybody's pleasure to move that draft motion as presented? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Bertels. Any questions, comments, discussion, or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. And just to clarify, Councillor Halverson, that was in favor, correct? Yes. All right, that takes us on to the electric utility requirement for a voltage regulator. There is a staff report. I will turn it over to staff to present the report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So an issue has been identified with low voltage in the Blue Rocks area. Voltage regulators are required to improve the situation. We've assessed the various options, but this is the lowest cost option to address the situation. The voltage regulator project will include 4 custom-built regulators, which would be 3 installed and 1 spare, and then the installation costs related to the same for a project of $250,000. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have all of this information at the time the capital budget was prepared. So this project will require some debt financing in the electric utility. It is anticipated that at the end of fiscal 22-23, the estimated debt for the utility will be just over $960,000. But there are other projects in current existing debt. There is an estimated interest cost of that would be about $38,000 or $17 per customer annually, which I know the Deputy Mayor probably had that question, so I was just preempting that one. We may have been. There is a draft motion in the report this evening for Council's consideration to support moving this project forward. It will also have to go before the board for approval as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Is it anybody's pleasure to move the draft motion as circulated? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Any questions, comments, discussion, debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Arena capital projects. There is a staff report, and I will turn it over to staff to present the report.
Point of order.
Apologies, Councillor Halverson. Did I miss something?
Yes, I had a question before you took the vote.
Oh, apologies. You can ask it now.
Moot. It's okay. Thanks.
Okay, sorry about that. Hybrid meetings.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the 22-23 capital budget, there's 3 approved capital projects for the Lunenburg War Memorial Arena. These include the ice resurfacer room renovations, accessible bathroom renovations for the main and dressing rooms, and an accessible entrance improvements. The town has also received a grant in the amount of $40,000 towards these projects. A request for proposals was issued for the ice resurfacer room renovations, and even with an extended deadline, only one proposal was submitted in the amount of $52,095. This is $17,095 higher than the original budgeted amount. It is requested to have the 3 arena projects together in one project budget. Staff will complete as many items as possible within the budget amount in a priority order determined by staff. There's currently no additional funding requested at this time, and there's no financial impact on the provincial grant funding. There's a draft motion for your consideration.
Thank you, Kelly. Anybody's pleasure to move the draft motion? The Deputy Mayor, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Duggan, Deputy Mayor with a question.
Just one question, Your Worship. What does the staff determine, a priority at this point in time that just to let us know?
So the first priority is the ice resurfacer room because that's essential for our operations. And next we'll be looking at the accessibility audit of which one was a higher priority.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Halverson, caught you this time.
You got me that time. Through the chair, just curious, what is the benefit in amalgamating the budgets?
So the benefit is that the ice resurfacer room is currently over budget. So it would just be able, we would be able to do as many projects as possible within that budgeted amount, rather than each of them being separate.
Okay, so does that, I guess my next question would be then, so if we're borrowing money out of the budgets projected for the bathroom renovations and the accessibility improvements, where's that money going to come from? Or is there enough in that 131,000 to cover all 3 of those projects?
Sorry, if I may, just to clarify, Councillor Halverson and staff, I believe what we're doing is consolidating line items in the budget so that those items with overages that are take priority can be financed. We're not incurring any further borrowing or anything like that. Does that answer your question, Councillor Halverson?
Well, my concern is I know some of this is attached to the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, Heritage's Rink Revitalization Grant. I don't want to make sure that, we're not overstepping or misusing some funds that if we get audited later, we're going to get our hands slapped for.
So there's no financial impact to the grant, as the approved amount is to, quote, assist with capital costs for accessibility in holding bay upgrades for the Lunenburg War Memorial Arena. So it's quite a broad description of what that funding was for.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions at this stage? Seeing none. Did we move and second this? I can't recall. We did? Yeah, you did. You and Councillor Duggan, sorry. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, next is a funding request from the LCLC for the 2022 Canadian Tire Para Hockey Cup Championship. There is a staff report. I will turn it over to staff to present the report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the Lunenburg County Lifestyle Center, LCLC in Bridgewater, has requested funding in the amount of $2,000. The grant would be used towards the 2022 Canadian Tire Para Hockey Cup at the LCLC in November, December, after this has been postponed for 2 years due to COVID. In the grants budget, there's currently $1,329 left, and there's also $2,500 in the operating reserves. Council has previously approved to support this event before COVID delayed. So in fiscal 2021, there was $1,000 that was approved. In fiscal 21-22, there was $2,000 that was previously approved. The Canadian Tire Hockey Cup highlights the world's top para teams, and this is the second time that these high caliber athletes will be competing at the LCLC, which was previously in 2016. The Para Hockey Cup is a regional event and an opportunity for all community members, especially those who may experience a disability, to see world-class competition in our local community. There are 3 options for council's consideration. Would you like me to go through them? Yes, okay. So option number 1 is to reverse the operating reserve transfer from the community grant funding in the amount of $671 and approve a grant to the LCLC in the amount of $2,000. Option 2 is to approve a grant in the amount of $1,000. And option 3 is to not approve a grant at all. There is a draft motion for your consideration.
Thank you, Kelly. Anybody's pleasure to move the draft motion? Either or both. They're sort of contingent on one another. Nobody moves it, it'll die on the floor. Moved by Councillor Halverson. Is there a seconder? Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion?
Thank you, Worship. Well, I am supportive of the event, but I am absolutely not supportive of reversing money out of our operating reserves. So I'd be more inclined to go for option 2 and not support the current motion that's on the floor.
All right, any further discussion? Councillor Halverson?
Deputy Mayor stealing all my thunder now that I'm not in the room. Basically, I want to concur with what he said. I think we made the decision to move that money into the operating reserves with good reason. And we had previously approved $1,000, so I don't think it's unreasonable to put $1,000 towards this. It is a worthwhile event, and for the reasons listed, I think it is a benefit to the community. So I'd be in support of option 2, approving a grant of $1,000 and leaving the operating reserves where they are.
Okay. So I will call the vote then. I don't think there's any further discussion. All those in favor of the recommended motion? Opposed? Councillor Halverson, just clarifying, you're opposed.
Sorry, I'm looking for the recommended motion here.
The recommended motion, which was moved and seconded by you and the Deputy Mayor, was for the 2,000.
Oh, yeah, opposed.
So you were opposed to that motion. So that motion is defeated unanimously. If anybody would like to make an alternative motion at this stage, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I'd move that we support this event and with a grant of $1,000.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Bertels, I saw first on the draw. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That takes us on to a noise bylaw exemption request from the Lunenburg Folk Harbor Society for Folk Harbor Festival. There is a draft motion provided. I think it's self-explanatory, but if staff wanted to summarize anything? No?
I guess I would just add, Your Worship, that they just noted that with our new town noise bylaw, that their events normally end at 11, but sometimes there's encores, and they just wanted to be sure that they were in compliance with that.
Perfect. Is it anyone's pleasure to move that draft motion as presented? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Bertels. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. That takes us on to the final item of the evening, the public transit feasibility study, which was presented earlier. There is a draft motion provided. If it's anybody's pleasure to move that motion. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Bertels. Is there any discussion or debate on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We have no in-camera business, and it is 6:54.